Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. And on tonight's episode, we will be joined by Jake Rill of MLB.com to break down all things that are happening in Orioles camp. But first, we want to welcome a new title sponsor here at Orioles on the Verge. This episode is brought to you by our IQ Bar, our exclusive snack, hydration, and coffee sponsor. IQ Protein Bars, IQ Mix Hydration Mixes, and IQ Joe Mushroom Coffees are the delicious, low-sugar brain and body fuel you need to win your day. The Ultimate Sampler Pack is a great way to try all IQ Bar products and flavors. You get 9 IQ Bars, 8 IQ Mix Snacks, and 4 IQ Joe Sticks. All IQ Bar products are clean label certified and entirely free from gluten, dairy, soy, GMOs, and artificial ingredients. All IQ Bar products are tested with clean, delicious ingredients that keep you physically and mentally fit, like magnesium, lion's mane, and more. Now, their products come in a variety of flavors. I will say personally, I've had a few. Peanut Butter Crisp is one of my favorites, so you get a chance to check out IQ Bar. Be sure to check out that flavor, one of their many other great flavors. And the good news is that we have an offer available to you right now. IQ Bar is offering special podcast listeners 20% off all IQ Bar products, including the Ultimate Sampler Pack, plus free shipping. To get your 20% off, text MLB to 64,000. Text MLB to 64,000. That's MLB to 64,000. Message and data rates may apply. See terms for details. And we also have that here on the lower third of the screen for those of you watching on YouTube. And with that, now I will introduce tonight's guest. He covers the Orioles for MLB.com. You can read his work over on the Orioles website, and if you've not subscribed to his excellent e-newsletter, be sure to do so. He is Jake Rill. Jake, how are you?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on tonight, guys.
Yeah, glad to have you here. And I just want to start off with a general sense of how things are going in camp. Would you say that the vibes around camp are good right now, especially compared to the way last season ended? And what are some of the differences you're seeing between this year's team and last year's club?
Yeah, I mean, the vibes are definitely up. I mean, I think the vibes in this camp are as good as they possibly could be after as disappointing of a year like as last year. And I think a lot of the credit for that has to go to Craig Albertaz, which is kind of obvious. I mean, you're not seeing many big league managers break out the slip and slide for sliding drills or, just ribbing guys and keeping the trash talk up. So I think he gets a lot of the credit for how high the vibes are. And then I think also Pete Alonso obviously gets a lot of the credit because he's come in here with a fresh outlook and just kind of stepped right into that leader role that, when you sign a guy to a contract like that, you're signing him for more than just the stats and more than just numbers on the baseball reference page. You're signing him to come in and be a leader, and he's been a big part of that. And I think those two guys have helped this organization kind of turn the page on last year. They're helping build the excitement for this year. And I think it's a different feel than past spring trainings. Every manager is going to run a spring training differently. Albie's spring training is going to be different than Brandon Hyde's. And, there's no right or wrong way to run a spring training, or maybe there is, but every manager is going to be different and different methods are successful. But Albie's is definitely different than what we had seen here in the past. And a lot of that's just the trash talk, the having fun, the keeping it really loose, maybe more loose than other camps. So I think the vibes have been up, and I think those two guys get a lot of the credit for it.
I felt like when we were talking before spring training started, we kind of threw out the question amongst ourselves, like, are we going to be able to pick up anything from, Albertaz, the way he manages the game in spring games and how that's going to translate to spring? And I know my response was, I just want to see the vibes in spring, because I feel like when the lights get turned on in the regular season, it's going to be a lot different for a first-year manager. We'll see how this team responds, but good to hear that things seem loose and upbeat at camp. You touched on Pete Alonso and taking on that leadership role. On the pitching side, I know Chris Bassett's new to the organization. He hasn't been there that long, but is he someone who's kind of stepping into that role on the pitching side, or is there someone else that's kind of stepping up to be that role amongst the pitchers, or is Pete Alonso just an all vibes, all team guy who's leading the whole way?
I do think Alonso is that, and I think it was noticeable before they signed Bassett, those first couple days of just the pitchers and catchers workout. I was watching Pete over there, like covering first on PFP drills, and he kind of got the pitchers together and was given kind of like a rah-rah, let's keep the energy up kind of thing. But I think since Chris Bassett got signed, he's definitely kind of stepped into that leadership role on the pitching side. Cade Povich was talking about it a lot one day. They were catch partners for a few days in a row, and Bassett just showed up in camp, and he's already giving Povich little tips and saying, maybe try this, try that. Also just kind of keeping the energy up with the pitchers. The day of the USA hockey gold medal game, Chris Bassett was kind of leading the group of guys watching that on the couch. He was kind of keeping the energy up during that. He was getting the most excited. I've really seen him kind of just talking to everybody. He's talking to Kramer, Bradish. He's really kind of lending any kind of advice that he has. And he obviously has a lot of it being in the game for so long. And I think him and Alonso kind of feed off each other because they have that tie. They spent that season together in New York with the Mets in 22. So they have that history. They have that friendship there. And I think their ribbing of each other and kind of the trash talk and that live BP when they face each other is kind of trickling down the roster. And guys are seeing how these guys do it, these guys who have been successful and have been veterans in the sport for a long time. So I think together they're kind of being co-leaders now. And I think Bassett's really going to be a big influence of that on the pitching side, just based off the early indicators of the conversations he's having and just kind of the reception he's gotten from the younger pitchers in camp.
I know there was no TV or radio coverage of today's game against the Netherlands, but it sounded like, just following along on Blue Sky or Twitter, that some sloppy defensive play early in the game, and Alonso actually called like a huddle up with the infielders and basically said, let's keep our heads in the game. I think that veteran leadership maybe is something that was missing last season.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Today's game was pretty sloppy. I think you can tell that. Just looking at the box score with I think it was 4 errors they ended up with. Jeremiah Jackson had to play at shortstop. That was a tough read that probably should have been caught. Played the Gunnar Henderson would have caught the ball one. I think it says a lot that Pete kind of rallied these guys. It's March 3rd, and it doesn't matter if they beat the Netherlands, but they want to play clean baseball. They want to play crisp baseball, and he thinks that starts now. And if you're doing it now, it's going to become second nature. You're going to be doing it in the regular season. He doesn't want guys to fall into bad habits just because, they are playing a little sloppy in spring training. So, yeah, I think 100% it says a lot that he's doing that in spring training. And I expect him to continue that leadership role into the regular season. And I'm sure we'll see more of it as camp continues and once the real games start.
And obviously a huge story this spring training has been Jordan Westburg's injury. Started with the oblique, and then obviously we heard about the elbow injury. He got PRP injection. Sounded like he was actually running. Him and Jackson Halliday working out a little bit today, but huge opportunity for Kobe Mayo to potentially win the third base job coming out of camp. What do we think? How has he looked so far? What are the vibes down there like on that front?
Yeah, I think Kobe Mayo so far a little bit has looked like a guy who hasn't played third base in a while. I mean, I think there has been a little bit of rust there. He was just putting so much focus and effort into first base. He was out there every day with John Mabry for the second half of last season, doing those first base drills, intense first base drills. He was putting all of his effort into that. He was getting good at first base, I think. Like, he was starting to look like maybe that is the path for him. He is going to be a long-time first baseman. He goes into the offseason thinking he's going to just do first base work, and then the Alonso signing happens, and he gets told, hey, you should probably start working at third a little bit now too, and kind of do both. And since we've been to camp, it's been strictly third base for him, and a lot of that has been the infield injuries. So I think as he gets back used to playing third base, it'll look little bit better. I mean, he's never going to be Jordan Westburg at third base. He's just not at that level defensively. His body type, I think we all know, maybe a little too big body to be a Gold Glove third baseman. The arm accuracy has always been a little bit of a work in progress. The arm strength is there. He can sling it across the diamond, but he continues to, tinker with arm slots. That's always been a big talk in past spring trainings of trying to find that arm slot that's going to be the most successful for him. So it's looked a little tough here in the first couple spring games. There were a couple errors. He has made a nice play or two since then. I think as he gets more used to being back over there, it's going to look a little bit better. And I think at this moment, he's probably the best choice to play third base as you look up down the roster, especially if the bat continues to do what he did with it in last September. I think you can deal with the defense at least for 7 innings, replace him with a defensive guy, just to try to get that bat in the lineup. I think he's their best choice at the moment, and I think it's going to look better as he gets more reps in spring. He's obviously going to get some, especially now that a lot of infielders have left to the WBC. There's going to be plenty of playing time for him here in these last 3 weeks of camp.
He even got an inning at shortstop. So, I mean, the glove's got to be coming along, right?
Yeah, he definitely did not think that was coming. That was a funny moment in camp, and I thought it was pretty telling that Gunnar came up and charged that one grounder that was kind of in between them. I think Gunnar knew he'd take the lead on that play.
We've heard, we've seen some good things about the prospects in camp. Enrique Bradfield Jr. had a few highlight reel plays before he went off to Team Panama in the World Baseball Classic. Trey Gibson has looked good on the mound, and Vance Honeycutt, all of a sudden we're seeing a power surge after a really disappointing 2025. So, of the prospects that are in camp and looking maybe the guys that have no shot of making the Major League roster but can still make good use of their time with the team for the next few weeks, who has stood out to you?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of them. Enrique Bradfield's always fun to watch to me. I just think he has such a skill set that nobody else on the Orioles roster really has, and I think it's going to be really exciting to see how his career develops. Obviously, the question is how much can he hit? As long as he hits enough, the speed and the glove is there. And it's always been fun to watch him, especially the other day when he dropped down a bunt, which he admitted wasn't even a good bunt, which it really wasn't. It went back to the pitcher, and he still legs it out, forces the bad throw, ends up on third. So he stands out just because of the speed. I mean, he's just so fast compared to everybody else in camp. Another guy who's really stood out to me is Anthony Nunez. I really like his arm. I like the secondary stuff. Obviously, he has such a crazy story of getting drafted as an infielder, getting released, going back to college, picking up pitching kind of out of nowhere after never pitching in his life. It's pretty remarkable that in just a couple years, just how good of a pitcher he has become. So much so that, he's probably going to be in the big league bullpen at some point this year. I just really like his secondary stuff. The slider's really nice. So he's a guy, I mean, there's a lot of those pitchers in that bullpen competition. Cameron Foster's another one. He's looked good. Grant Wolfram's looked really good. I know he's not a prospect, but there's a lot of guys in that bullpen competition of that ilk who have stood out. Nestor Herman, he's looked really good. You ask Craig Albernaz about any of these guys like Luis De Leon, Herman, Gibson, and he's always just like growth. Like that's all he says, just because it's like every one of these guys has really good stuff, and they each kind of have their own skills or their own strengths. De Leon just has, high 90s plus stuff. Gibson has all these pitches. Herman's just really good. All of these guys have looked good in camp to me. It's been really fun to watch them, especially, being at the big league games all season long. I don't get to see a lot of these guys in person a ton, except for the few times I do go down on the farm. So it's really fun to watch these guys in big league camp, get their chance to make an impression, play in front of the big league coaching staff. Yeah, I'd say the biggest ones that have caught my eye are the pitchers, Anthony Nunez, Gibson, Herman, just because they've really held their own in camp, and it shows that their stuff can play at the big league level probably pretty soon.
Have you noticed any difference in how the younger prospects, like those guys, even the ones that like Nestor Herman or Trey Gibson, aren't going to make the major league club out of camp, but have you noticed any difference in maybe how they're incorporated into workouts, spring games, or how the coaching staff are talking about these younger prospects compared to years past as you covered the team?
Well, one of the big things Albie always says is that there's no second-class citizens in camp. Like, everybody's an equal. If you're in big league camp, you deserve to be there. Even if you're one of those guys who aren't going to make the team, they're not going to treat you any differently or handle you any differently. Like, they want these guys to get the experience of big league camp. So even if there's not an actual shot of trying to make the team, they want these guys to go out there, participate in drills, play in the games, and give the effort that they would if they were battling for a roster spot. I think it's really impressive the way Albie kind of does that and handles these guys. The Orioles have honestly always done a good job of that. I feel like the last couple springs, it's always been like these prospects are there to get their shot to make an impression on the big league staff. They're going to be throwing in front of Drew French and hitting in front of the hitting coaches. So I don't feel like it's been like a huge shift, but I think Albie does do a good job of like, hey, this is your chance to show what you can do. We're not going to treat you any differently. Whether you're Pete Alonso or whether you're Nate George Nate George isn't a big league camp, but he is. Even when that's a good point though. When they bring over the guys from minor league camp, it's like the extras on the days of games. So Vance Honeycutt, Nate George, they work out with the team all day, and they do get thrown out there just like they're in big league camp and they're with those guys. So I think it's a really good opportunity for those guys to make an impression on the big league staff, even though, like you said, they're not going to be on the team, and they don't get treated any differently. It's, hey, go out there and give it your best, and we're going to evaluate you and be hard on you and give you constructive criticism so that when you go back to minor league camp or when you get options, it's going to set you up for success this year in the minors.
Point on Bradfield. I mean, the defense is truly remarkable. It's not just the speed either. It's like he gets put in right field in that game and he just takes a direct route perfectly, cuts the ball off, makes a great play. Yeah, he's been super impressive for me.
We had, speaking of younger, not a prospect, but still a younger guy, Heston Kjerstad. I don't think we've only had one show since spring game started, and that was our top prospect list. So we haven't even really had a chance for the three of us to kind of dive into our thoughts this spring. But Kjerstad, I can only speak for myself, but I imagine there are a lot of fans who agree that coming into 2026, once the news came out that Kjerstad was going to have a full spring, I know my response was like, that's good news, but like I'm not even penciling him into like a roster projection. It's whatever he can provide in 2026 is a plus. We still don't have any idea why he didn't return last year, and his personal health is no one else's business. But knowing his past with the myocarditis, the concussion, I know we're kind of left like a second time now wondering, just put baseball aside, is this guy just going to be okay? Clearly he feels good now. He's playing well. Do you see any viable path for Heston Kjerstad to make this roster at a camp, or potentially even, to make this kind of like a two-part question, could they even potentially move on from a Leody Taveras when you see a Dylan Beavers working out there in center field? Is him being kind of like a backup option to Kowser and that allowing Kjerstad to make the roster?
Yeah, I do think it is a tough path. He's got to come in here and really force their hand and have a spring that makes them, find a spot for him. And he is kind of doing that. He has looked really good. The at-bats have been great. The numbers, I know they're not super important, but he is hitting well. Like you said, Leo Taveras, they would probably have to move on from him, find a room for Kjerstad on the roster, just because you'll have Ward, Kowser, O'Neill, Beavers. Those are the four outfield blocks. You're not going to carry six outfielders, especially with just how shaky the infield depth is at the moment. If Kobe Mayo is your third baseman, you need to have somebody on the bench, maybe Luis Vazquez or one of these guys who can be a good backup infielder. So it gets tricky with the roster construction there to make a case for Heston Kjerstad as a sixth outfielder. He would have to be the fifth outfielder, and the only one of those guys who you would be comfortable maybe pushing off is Leody Taveras. And I think it is a little bit telling that Beavers has gotten more time in center, because when we talked to Beavers at Birdland Caravan, we'd asked him, have you done any work in center? And he said, no, not at all. And he wasn't really expecting it. And then we get to camp, and he does get mixed into the center field drills. We see him making starts in center field in games. And they've talked about it as, this is going to make him better in the corners. And while that's true, it's also, hey, maybe this guy can be the backup center fielder to Kowser. Leody Taveras has had up and down moments in this camp. He had that game in Fort Myers against the Twins where he had a couple tough plays in center. That was mostly lost the ball in the sun. This guy's track record of being a decent defensive player is kind of his calling card, and I think would be why you would keep him on the roster more so than what he can bring offensively. But if Kjerstad's carrying the cover off the ball and you're like, hey, this is a really good add for our roster, maybe a left-handed power bat, which is maybe something that you don't have on the bench otherwise, just because you have the right-handed guys. You have Mountcastle, you have Jeremiah Jackson, but you don't have maybe a guy like Kjerstad to maybe bring a little more balance to that lineup, which is weird to say because it felt like this lineup was so left-handed heavy for so long, and now you have Alonso, you have Taylor Ward, you have a healthy Tyler O'Neill, hopefully. That having another left-handed bat could be useful with Kjerstad, but I think he has to keep it up. I don't really think there's anything he needs to change at the moment just because he has had such a good first 3 weeks of camp. If he keeps playing the way he's playing, putting up these numbers, line drives off the bat all the time, his defense is going to be what it is, but you're not keeping him on the roster for his defense. You're keeping him on the roster to get some starts at DH, to be left-handed power. So I think it's still a little bit of a tricky path just because you can option him at the start of the year. You can see what Leody Taveras brings to the team. You can kind of play with your roster like that and see if that's the best composition of it, and maybe bring up Heston a little bit later if he goes down to AAA and starts raking, which it seems like he almost always does when he goes down to AAA, except for last year when he was obviously dealing with whatever he was dealing with and maybe wasn't 100% himself as we had seen in the past. So I think he just keeps doing what he's doing this spring. He's going to at least give them a tough decision to make at the end of camp. I'm not sure it's going to be enough to get him on the team, but he's going to at least give them something to think about when it's that last week and they're like, hey, this is a guy we should bring north with us.
Nobody does selling better than Shopify. Shopify is the home of the #1 checkout on the planet. And the not-so-secret with Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts go abandoned and way more sales going through. So if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. On the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. Businesses that sell more, sell on Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout that Skims uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period for 3 months at shopify.com/Westwood1, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/Westwood1 to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/Westwood1.
Speaking of center field, are you surprised Blaze Alexander hasn't gotten much run or a shot to see what he looks like out there?
Yeah, I think he's going to. It's just been a little tricky here early in camp just because the infield depth has been kind of what it is. It's better now that they signed Tyro Estrada. At least there's a guy you can throw it in there in the Grapefruit League game. So I think early in camp it was just kind of a little necessity, like, hey, we got to play somebody here in the middle infield, play somebody at third. We're going to put Blaze there. That's probably where he's going to play mostly at the start of the season, at least until Holiday comes back, I think. Once Holiday comes back, I feel then Blaze can move around more. Even without Westberg, at least then you have Holiday locking down second. You don't have to worry about putting Blaze there really at all. So I think over the next couple weeks, we're going to see him more in the outfield, especially as they start to get infielders back from the WBC. Once they get back to Vasquez and Gunnar, like as you get to that last week of camp, I think there'll be more opportunities to get Blaze reps out there in the outfield. But I think he's comfortable out there. It seems like he plays fine out there. I know he's an infielder first, so I don't think they're too worried about it. And especially with the outfielders they do have on the roster, like I'm not sure how many start realistically he would get there based just on current roster construction. But I think they love having the option. They love having a guy who they can put out there. And I think as we get through here these last couple weeks of camp, we're going to see him out in the outfield at least a little bit more.
I want to go back to Tyler O'Neill for a moment since you brought him up earlier. We know that his first season with the Orioles didn't go the way that he or the club would have wanted it to, and he's also has a long track record of injuries in the majors. But with that said, the bat has looked good in camp so far. Where's your sense of where he is physically right now, and is he hopeful perhaps that this season's going to be a little bit better?
Yeah, I think he's in a little bit better shape physically. As weird as this is to say, he's maybe a little less jacked than last year. Like he's still like the most jacked guy on the team, obviously, but he focused more on other stuff in the off season, less so lifting and stuff like that. You can kind of see it in the neck area that he's maybe not like less bodybuilder, more baseball player now, and I think that's going to help him durability wise. Also, maybe move around the outfield a little bit better, base pass. But this is still a guy who you're going to have to be very careful with, just with the injury track record. It's been proven that this is a guy who he's going to go on the IL probably at least once this year. It's just what it is. So you got to be smart about it. Give him these DH starts, give him time off. And I think having Dylan Beavers on the roster is going to help a lot with that, just because you have guys who you feel comfortable playing if you give Tyler a day off. But I've been really impressed with the quality of the at-bat so far this spring. He looks really good. He looks like the type of player he was in Boston in 24, maybe even as good as he was there early in St. Louis. It looks like a better Tyler O'Neill this spring than what I saw last spring. And I think that's really encouraging because if they're able to manage his health and they're able to keep him on the field as frequently as possible, he could be a big part of this lineup, and it just adds another right-handed bat with all these other ones that they brought in. And I think it just makes the lineup that much deeper. So I think he's really hopeful. I think the team's really hopeful. And, you know, I kind of believe what he's been saying and what the team's been saying about their encouragement and optimism about him, because it's kind of matched the eyeball test to me of what I've seen out here, that he looks to be in better shape. He looks more mobile. He looks like he's going to be a guy who can actually make an impact in 2026.
How about guys that may or may not make an impact in 2026. Ryan Mountcastle, how much longer can the team play kind of Russian roulette with keeping him on the roster with the room? Obviously, the injuries to Westberg and Holiday will help him potentially make the opening day roster, but you already got Basayo, Mayo, Alonso for first base DH. Adley could get some time there. Tyler O'Neill could get some time there. What do you see this year looking like for Ryan Mountcastle and the Orioles?
Yeah, I think it's weird. I mean, if you had told me that he'd still be on this roster at this point after they made the Alonso signing, I'd be surprised. I'd really be surprised if you told me that Alonso, Mountcastle, and Mayo would all still be here. But at least Mayo is a guy who can put it third, and that proved to be valuable as soon as Westberg got hurt. Yeah, I don't know how much playing time realistically there is for Mountie right now, just because, like you said, you want Basayo and Rutschman in the lineup as often as possible together. You're going to use the DH a lot for that. You need to use O'Neill on the DH just to keep him healthy. If you carry a guy like Heston Kjerstad, you're going to want him at DH some. Jeremiah Jackson, if he makes the roster, he's probably going to be at DH some because he is such a bat-first player and doesn't really have a true defensive position. So it does make it tough to find opportunities for Mountcastle because they keep saying, like, oh, well, he'll get some time at first, but I just don't know how much time at first. You're not paying Pete Alonso $155 million to DH a ton. Like, you're paying him that much to play first base every day. He has a track record of playing first base every day, and he'll go out there and post for you. So I think it's tricky right now to find time for Mountie, and it would still not surprise me if at some point this year he gets traded. It just makes too much sense. Maybe try to get a pitching package for him. This bullpen needs another high leverage arm, in my opinion. It needs more depth. Maybe you could get young starting pitching as part of a package. I don't know exactly what that would look like, but I think it just makes too much sense because if you're able to deal Mountie for something like that, Mayo can easily be your backup first baseman. He can be your backup third baseman when and if Westberg gets back. So I think at the moment, Mountcastle's looking at a time situation where he's probably not going to get a ton of starts. He's more so a right-handed bat off the bench. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. Obviously, if he's healthy, he can be a really good player. We've seen that. We've seen how good he can be at first base. He has to be an appealing player to teams who are looking for somebody in that mold. So it would not surprise me. But for now, it's just, hey, we have more depth and our bench is really good because we have a guy like Ryan Mountcastle on it. And it's going to be kind of picking your spots and finding opportunities to try to get him in the lineup.
Yeah, well, I think everybody's surprised Mountcastle is somehow still on this roster. But you mentioned the bullpen there and potentially need another high leverage arm, maybe some more depth. There's been some good fun pieces we've seen so far. You mentioned Anthony Nunez and Cameron Foster. I feel like this is kind of where, outside of maybe like the last hitter or so on the roster, I feel like the bullpen has been a big area of focus here and who makes this club. You've got some of the younger guys like Nunez and Foster, like I mentioned, who are on the 40-man roster already. You've got some veterans, guys like Yennier Cano. A lot of positive talk from Albie about Cano, and he's been proving it on the mound so far in spring. He does have a minor league option, a little bit of flexibility there. Grant Wolfram pitching well, like you mentioned, also has options. A lot of these guys have options, but then you've also got a lot of guys who, your Dietrich Enns, even your Albert Suarez, who don't have options. How do you see the rest of these bullpen spots outside of the locks? How do you see the rest of this potentially playing out? Do you see the veterans pending health and things continue to go how they're going in spring so far? Do you see the veterans like Suarez and others who don't have options getting first run and they just kind of stash this big bullpen group in Norfolk to start the year and bring them up as needed? Or do you think there could be potentially a surprise or two up the Orioles sleeve when it comes to rounding out the bullpen?
Yeah, I could honestly see it going either way, but I kind of lean on the side of maybe less surprise. I think, the four locks, obviously, we've got Helsley, Kittredge, Aiken, and Tyler Wells. So Tyler Wells is going to be on the team, but he's also not getting stretched out. He's only pitching in one-inning spurts right now. So even though they haven't come right out and said it, he is a reliever at this point. He's not getting built up, and you're not going to not carry him on the team. So you have those four. Cano and Enns were guys who I thought were near locks, and I think now Cano is a lock just because of how good he looks. I think it makes sense to carry him. You're going to need another lefty. Dietrich Enns doesn't have options, even though he had that one tough spring outing. It's also a spring outing, just working on stuff. Can't read too much into the numbers. I still think he's on this team. So then only leaves two spots, and I think maybe the less exciting in terms of prospect young arm option is Rico Garcia and Grant Wolfram for those two spots. So I think it'd be something like that to round out the bullpen. I think Wolfram right now is pitching his way onto the team just because of how good he's looked. Albie said multiple times, like watching the left-handed batters hit against him, it's just an uncomfortable at bat, is the way he puts it, just with how good his stuff has looked. And I think it's valuable to have a lefty like that in the pen because Keegan Aiken's probably not the high leverage guy. Your bullpen's better if he's not the high leverage guy. Dietrich Enns is more of a bulk guy, multi-inning guy. So you bring him in early in the game. I think Wolfram has that potential to be the high leverage lefty. Maybe they still go out and get a high leverage lefty at some point if it doesn't work out. I think a big question about this bullpen is there's a lot of question marks in it, and you don't know. I mean, this bullpen could be really good if everybody pitches to their ceiling and everybody reaches their potential. But the fact of the matter is it's probably not going to happen, just the way it is. But like you said, with the depth, with the other guys in here, you can option guys like Nunez and Foster and let them kind of continue their development in AAA. The stuff is obviously there. Maybe a little more time down there gets them more ready to contribute to the big league level. Because while the stuff's there, they just maybe don't have as much experience. So it would not surprise me if those last two bullpen spots go to guys like Garcia, Wolfram, guys who we saw in the bullpen in 2025 who had that big league experience. Guys like that who maybe they trust more so right out of the gate while they kind of let some of these younger guys develop. But there always could be a surprise, or they could make a late move. I always think of the Danny Coulomb acquisition on the last day of spring training. As guys don't make their rosters of other teams, Elias is always out there trying to, figure out ways to pick up a piece here or there, added the bullpen late. So it would not surprise me if there are surprises, whether that's in the form of a guy who isn't on the projected roster somehow sliding in, or if it's them making a move, an acquisition to bring somebody in last minute.
That had to be fun when you had your storylines all spring and then last second, tear him up. We got Danny Coulomb. And hey, Danny Coulomb's still available right now. He's still a free agent. So maybe he comes back. All right, so the next question we got is, who gets that last bench spot? Do we think it's a Luis Vasquez who had some time last year, can obviously play some pretty solid defense on the infield, or is it a Jeremiah Jackson who really flashed with the bat last year, came out of nowhere, doesn't have as much of a defensive position? How do you see that final bench spot going?
Yeah, I thought it was Jeremiah Jackson's job kind of to lose coming into spring training, or once the injuries happened, and it kind of made it clear that there was that last bench spot available just because of what he did last year, especially in that August when he came up and had so much offensive success. But as I've kind of watched spring training games and drills and, thought more about the composition of the roster, I almost feel like it would make more sense to have Luis Vasquez on the roster just because he can play anywhere in the infield. And he might be the best defensive infielder in camp or in this organization. Like, he's that good with the glove. And if you're going to have Kobe Mayo playing at third base as your starter, it's incredibly valuable to have Vasquez to come in off the bench and be a defensive replacement. I could see it going either way. I think both those guys, there are cases to be made. I will say Vasquez, I think he can be better with the bat than he showed last year, because last year it was not great. It was pretty clear it was not great. He put in a lot of work in the offseason, fine-tuned some hitting mechanics, hit really well in the Puerto Rican Winter League, actually led that league in home runs. And one of the hitting coaches down there was Brady North, the new Orioles assistant hitting coach. So there's already kind of a relationship there. They've been working at it together even before the report of the camp. So I think there's a little bit more to unlock there. He's never going to be a great offensive player, but I think he can be better than what it was last year. Good enough that, hey, if this guy can hit a little bit and provide that kind of defense, that might be more valuable to you than a Jeremiah Jackson who hit well in a short spurt, but also we don't know how it's going to translate over to a longer period and really has just struggled with the glove. I don't know where you feel comfortable playing him. Right field probably is the most comfortable, but there's also not going to be time in right field because there's too many other guys. So if you're playing Jeremiah Jackson in the field, it's going to be second base probably some days. And it's just not as good as Luis Vasquez at second base. It's a guy who needs more defensive reps, I think. And there's nothing wrong with optioning to AAA and saying, hey, you're going to play second base or second base every day, play a little with third base, get better with the glove, and then hit your way back up here. So I think off the bat, it would make more sense to keep Vasquez, but also know that Jeremiah Jackson will probably contribute at some time this year, especially if he goes down to AAA and kind of picks up where he left off with the bat last year and kind of hits his way back up to the majors.
Last couple questions here, fun ones. What do you do in your downtime while you're down in spring training? Are you like Jim Palmer, catching up on the latest season of Love Is Blind? How are you spending your off days?
Yeah, not a lot of TV. I went to the beach yesterday, which was nice. Always try to get to the beach as much as possible while down here. It's tough. A lot of good restaurants. I like going out to eat for dinner after games or after long days. It's easier in that first period of camp before games start because it's just a workout. Then the afternoon clubhouse is earlier in the afternoon, so we get done pretty quickly there. So there's a lot bigger of a window. Once these games start, especially with the travel, driving really far, like didn't get back till late from Fort Myers. I think that was yesterday. So less free time then, but mostly just beach and relaxing, honestly. These days can get long, and it's always weird because during the season I don't have to get up this early, and then for 6 weeks of spring training, it's like I'm getting up the earliest I have since I was like in high school probably. Like it's just like I'm not used to the early alarms. So most of the time, by the time I'm done work, it's just I just want to take it easy and relax, honestly.
I was gonna say, are you at the point already where it's like it's still spring training is still young and fresh and fun? You had a Monday off day, a little bit of a unique game today, so maybe like you're feeling a little bit better, or are you like, nah, can we pack this up and get up to Baltimore tomorrow? I'm ready to be out.
Yeah, I'd say a couple of days ago I was starting to maybe hit a little bit of a wall, but the off day did come at a good time, and the second off day will also come at a good time. I'm always ready for the season to start. Spring training games are fun, and it's fun to come down here and watch guys throw their first bullpen sessions, watch them throw their first live BPs. I was excited for Shane Boz's debut, so I wanted to see Bassett pitch in a game for the first time. But now that we kind of checked all those boxes, it's like, all right, maybe let's like speed up this last couple weeks and let's just get up north, especially as it kind of becomes more clear who's going to make the team.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. Hey, we still have Zach Eflin to make his debut coming up, but yeah, we pretty much we're getting to that point. But last question for me is we have a very familiar group of beat reporters and guys like Andy Koska, the Banner, Matt Wyrick, and JCM of the Sun. How do you guys all get along? Is it like seeing your buddies again when you get down to spring, or is it like, oh, you competition? I don't know. What's it like between you guys?
No, we all get along well. It's great. It's always exciting to see that. Like, we spend so much time together during the season that I feel like by the end of the season, we're all kind of ready. Like, all right, let's all take a break from each other a little bit, just because we are like around each other so much. But it's always fun to get back together, being at spring training. I will say that the first night of spring training, I went out with Andy and Matt and beat them in darts. So I had bragging rights a little bit. But we went out again a couple nights ago, and Andy actually smoked me and Matt. So right now, Andy's kind of the reigning darts champion, but don't let that get to his head too much. But yeah, it's always good to see those guys. We have a great beat. It's not like, we're competitive. It's weird because we're all employed by different people, and we are competitors in a sense, like you said. But like, it's not fully that way. Like, we're also friends. It's fun, and it's always a good time hanging out after road games. And once work's over, we're able to, turn work off and just hang out and have a good time.
It does seem like a good group, and I'm glad it's been some, not as much turnover lately as it had been in the past.
Well, when we have Andy on in a few weeks, I'll be sure to ask him how the darts games are going, see who's ahead by then. Jake, thank you so much for joining us. Before you wrap up, can you let our listeners know where to find your work and what you have coming up over the next few weeks here in spring training as we gear up for the regular season?
Yeah, my work's all on Orioles.com, and as you mentioned before, I have an email newsletter that goes out twice a week you can sign up for. I actually have a story I'm working on right now, probably for later this week, a bigger story on Anthony Nunez. I kind of dove deeper into his background, and I just think he has such an interesting story. So I have something coming up on that I'm pretty excited about. I think it's a guy who deserves a bigger story right now, just because this is a guy who's going to break onto the scene for the first time, it feels like. So I have something coming on that, and then just the day-to-day coverage. Like you said, Eflin's first Grapefruit League start coming up. I'll be there for that. And looking forward to wrapping up these last 3 weeks of spring training and getting up to Baltimore soon.
And we look forward to reading more of your coverage. Thank you so much, Jake.
Yeah, thank you guys. I appreciate it.
That does it for this episode of Orioles on the Verge. We will be back later this week as Bob, Nick, and I break down the best of the rest, the players who just missed our top 50 prospects list. In the meantime, you can check out our many social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, Blue Sky, YouTube, and Twitch. We're also over at Substack, OriolesOnTheVerge.substack.com. And while you're browsing around the internet, be sure to head over to Patreon.com and sign up to become a member today at the $3, $5, or $10 levels. We're going to have bonus weekly coverage throughout the regular season. You'll also get monthly updates to our top 50, access to our patron-exclusive channels in our Discord community, and a whole lot more, so be sure to check that out over at Patreon.com. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens and Zach Spedden, you've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, part of the Believe Podcast Network.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.